there were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted. Actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame like onto Alameda and like, I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore. So we were warning people, hey, this is probably insolvent. Get your money out. But CZ ultimately was the big, like, he was the most notorious and like well-respected. I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos.
Easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot.
Figured it out, and someone would have started dumping their coin.
Yeah, people already, even leading up, like CZ gets a lot of the credit for it, but like already, like a day before.
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this, There
was already all this worry. In the past, that summer, there had been a bunch of companies that collapsed, and people had never thought FTX. It was kind of the first time anyone thought FTX could maybe not have the money around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in. So you kind of think you're swimming safely with, like, other savvy investors, and that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. And, like, one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. The son of Harvard lawyers. We just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he was assets. You can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
Change that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
And why is so much of your balance sheet made up of your own tokens? It's a big question. So one of the things that FTX had done, and a lot of companies were doing at the time, might be one of the first, like, trillionaires or whatever, like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys. Or you withdraw, there's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to like this random external address because you send it to a different one. Money system. Especially in our modern age, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from. The average person was they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, there was fungibility between wallets.
And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I study, basically screaming about, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like it had gotten used to play. I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist, this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. A1Z, A16Z. It was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So all the story broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? He happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have...
Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of two Harvard lawyers, right? It's all at some address. And so people were asking, like, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum?
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone.
And I'd go because it was like my friends like said, hey, we have to get somebody. You want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was like kind of fascinated. and you'd see these guys, all these other wallets, that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like, it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea, make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had really going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal. And we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there. And all of a sudden it starts this firestorm because people are like, there's wire transfer and it's kind of expensive to do these. Like, you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is like, okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take like to expose. But like, I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about. That's the issue, was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who like pushed over the House senator's office reached out to me. They're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to, this is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, we don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger, like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
Success. 2 months. You're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this. Of was going on. Now he's still like trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big like kind of scam, it wasn't like he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after like the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over. Whoa. Like, your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store, they bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names, and also very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer, like they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX. Wow. Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
Will fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like, you have to do, I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, like, scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, it's almost used. Sort of, this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme. You have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange. I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college, and all my friends get an MLMs, multi-level marketing, sort of like just like the hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these like get rich seminars and basically like shell games where you're hiding the money. Yeah. You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch of people, the account, fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured. Now I can just send you $100K. It's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people like kidnap people's data and things along those lines, they'd like to get paid. It's bizarre that so many people got duped. And I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
The problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral, this thing. So all this money's going in, and then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
Actually, campaign finance laws, I've heard, are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate. At the end, when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me on, let me ask him some real hard questions. because all these guys are like, Sam, we launched FTX in 2019, and that's a crypto platform where honestly you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. That's what ultimately matters, is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out. And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is time, but FTX was sort of the worst offender, is let's say I give you a loan, Joe. So an unsecured loan would be I give you $1 million and I don't ask for anything.
The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse, the things, it's insane. It's really, I almost wish.
In the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about? Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately, it's like, and so I realized, like, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology and the crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But a lot.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to. He's doing interviews with. I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to like end up with a sales pitch. Like it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch. Mm-hmm. So I didn't.
Chemtrails.
Let me say this: if it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real. And it just was kind of. I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to like, even before that, I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like LGBTQ plus causes, and it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this, and they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through. Who's everybody? I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, was going to undo sort of everything. Like if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're great, it's like the house always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred, never understood how Bernie Madoff got people because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I noticed with all of these things, the thread is somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, I went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was like, I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any. Found out how to be successful, and if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it, but it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your really taking that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that,
abilities. It's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that, like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's
like investment funds. They invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it. And ultimately, one of the ways, like, even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through them for like all these not having sort of like, it's maybe not big enough. They're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding.
Like what exactly, like what are the regulations in terms of like what you're allowed to do and donate, and how did he violate them?
So I think the big violation was you're not supposed to. They have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's what Ethereum, what are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business, and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that?
Yeah. So by the third interview, I'd studied him, and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to, it was the terms of...
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA? Friedberg? Shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy...
What was his... I remember, but what was his...
They're setting it up with, like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke, right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to be really effective. It's like lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means, like, you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams. But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me... I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me money and go start trading with it. Unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But, like, they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. But even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit. Like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no...
It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. There was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. Everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, appreciate your transparency. All this kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail, but by these little tricks, and so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. He thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, they're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job, like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just like...
There's like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
Eventually got paid out like $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token, though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's like November was when he's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like, I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. I started hearing about these tokens, and they're like, hey, selling courses, like, it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. Like, they go like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Like, hey, drop shipping is... So CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know, whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark. I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay. I'm not going to stop making these videos. You're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? I mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had deal, but I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is, a lot of people had... He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was... It's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he's like, well, like, think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. With regulators, they were all Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed. And CZ felt like he was cut out. So that stirred up this battle between them. And ultimately calling that a fraud early, I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud. Executives Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, yeah, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam. Say something. Because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? Why? I hadn't really found my footing. But throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with like hucksters and fraud where, you know, when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer, or a system to where they could see you, Joe, deposit a Bitcoin on FTX. They could grab that Bitcoin and start trading with it immediately.
Whoa.
Even though they were never supposed to be able to. It is the experience of the lawyer that FTX then hires is like being complicit on a private call, leaked private call, trying to cover up this God mode scam. Gay, so like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no, basically they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So, hey, you're going to be the guy. Like, tokens like is the individual, you can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you have Bitcoin. Then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum.
So when I see something like that go down, I'm like, how did he get Steven Spielberg? You know, how does someone like a Bernie Madoff or Sam Bankman-Fried, how does he get these people to do this?
Dark, where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be, your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt, and he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. It's sort of like hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, like there's always a new like health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they?
It wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to like be that successful that you just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking
smart thing, which is something like this happens, you shut up. You don't say anything.
Right.
And then you point at your boss. I mean, that's basically what they did.
Oof.
Which they for sure did stuff wrong too. It's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay, I mean, he was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the like returns were insane, but money to a politician on my behalf, you're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable. It's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by C. A lot of people found out about crypto at the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the like most fair case you could make about.
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16. Everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So it really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange. I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and I have to do the God mode on Ultimate Bet, where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So I too am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I can put my money there.
Is the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin.
Not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became in 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here. But the problem is that with the Z on Twitter, I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your...
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices. And then after he made his money that way, he
go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington.
Analogy for losing your house?
You know what's funny? Yeah.
You know, I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So like, let's say I decided to start pursuing it step by step. And at first it was like just me discovering like, well, what is this? Well, how does this scheme work? Okay, so I buy this course and then what? Well, it's Coinbase. It seems like they're, legitimate. But so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like, gosh, they've recently been shut down. But the idea was
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better?
It means playing League of Legends while an investor goes. Like at the time, that was seen as this charming, genius thing.
On calls.
You could hear even actually. Okay, I saw all this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff, and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that's
why the celebrities are important, and that's why
huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part, yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, "Hey, I'm," So this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. What that was to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books, but. It's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our balance. Some reactions, but not much. What I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like I was just like, there was something different about the reaction to it. Like, and Vic, what I know is everyone's always interested in pulling up the ladder after them. And like building the kind of the rule book around like, hey, like if you're from this certain jurisdiction that we're a part of, you're fine. If you're not, like I'll have to. My feeling is offshore entities should not be. They're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore, like, yeah, I don't know. It's
and probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was
whiz kid, who you listen to him talk, he has an answer for everything.